Well, for more on the British economy and its future prospects, let's bring in Brian Beary. He's a Washington-based journalist and an expert on the European Union. He's also a contributing editor to European Affairs. Now, Brian, as we heard in that report, some bright spots from the financial crisis, but there might be a bit of deja vu as we look at the economic picture now. You have this contraction in July, construction and manufacturing falling. But how much of this is the Brexit effect versus other underlying factors?
I think the Brexit effect is definitely the biggest chunk of it. The data that's been trickling in the last couple of weeks that's trying to measure the impact of the Brexit vote has uniformly indicated that the growth has slowed down or stopped entirely. And the growth forecast for 2017 is significantly lower now than it was before the Brexit vote. In fact, the adjustment in the forecast is the biggest adjustment downwards in about 20 years. The IMF, in its report a couple of weeks back, was clear that it believed the Brexit vote itself was behind this, in particular due to the growing lack of confidence as to what the future holds in store politically and the knock-on effect of that economically.
Now, Brian, with that being said, just last week, Britain's new Finance Minister, Philip Hammond, said that the UK fundamentals were still strong despite the Brexit fears. So what do you make of that assessment?
I think it's his job to, talk up the economy to the point of you don't want to talk it down and further depress consumer sentiment and further depress consumer purchases, etc. But there's no doubt it is taking a bit of a hit. One factor, the British pound having dropped lost about 10% of its value because of the Brexit vote, is starting to see an uptick in inflation as the cost of imports is increasing. And this is making, for example, car purchases. There's some very recent data on car purchases that suggest that we're about to see a downturn in the auto market in purchase as people feel they can no longer afford, or it's not the time to buy a car, for example.
Now, let's also look at the Bank of England's response. They've cut the interest rate now by 25 basis points to a record low 0.25%. What do you think of that move?
It's interesting in that it's the first change in several years. It's also, they're very close to zero already. They went from 0.5 to 0.25. There's not a whole lot room more, and its European partners have also been living in a virtual zero interest rate zone for years now. But it's definitely, I think you should take this combined with the stimulus in terms of the bond buying, both of UK government bonds and of some corporate bonds, as sort of a package of monetary stimulus efforts, which to me is very reminiscent of what the European Central Bank has been trying for several years now to give a bit of a jolt to the Eurozone economy. It's almost like that the Bank of England is trying the same medicine.
But with that being said, once you do cut these rates, what other tools then do you have in your toolbox if things are already at historic lows?
You have some more monetary tools, but I think there's a limit to what the Bank of England can do. I think everybody is hoping for greater certainty on the political front. And unfortunately, we have some additional certainty with Theresa May having become Prime Minister quicker than people had expected. However, there's no indication yet as to when the famous Article 50 will be triggered, launching the Brexit negotiations with the EU. There's no indication what type of relationship the UK actually wants after if it exits. And in fact, I use the word if because there are still voices within the UK government, including and also in the opposition party in Labour, that are saying it's still an if, not a when, and there are others that are saying it's a when, not an if. All of this is very confusing for the markets, which is not helping matters. Now,
with that being said, just quickly as we wrap up here, are there any industries that are really benefiting from this economic downturn that England's experiencing?
There may well be. I'm unaware myself of them. The two industries that I'm aware of that are being hit and are very worried are the financial services industry and the automaking industry. Ford is suggesting maybe needing to relocate, and also JP Morgan Chase, I believe, and Goldman Sachs are suggesting similar things as either direct or indirect consequences of the Brexit vote. And they're the sort of headline stories. There may be some bright news amongst it all, but for the moment we're hearing more the gloomy stuff.
Indeed, definitely something we'll have to keep an eye on there. Brian Beary joining us, journalist and EU expert. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.